What's up, Lisbon? How we doing? GM, most important word. Someone already spotted my dyslexia, NETFs. Good one. So yeah, I'm stoked to be here. I live around, so for me, it's kind of like speaking at home is always nice. I'm gonna be touching today on sort of like what's next for brands within Web3 and NFTs. I think that has been a very hot topic since 2021. Obviously, Adidas, Nike coming into that space. A lot has happened. We're gonna cover a lot of that, and we know where we are. So it's quite exciting to start thinking and strategizing and exercising what's next. So to kick off, who the fuck is that guy, right? So let's start from there. I'm a advisor for Fortune 500 brands in NFTs, Web3, and Metaverse, or whatever you want to call it. Now maybe computing spacing. We don't know how the name is going to be, but you get the concept. I was at Adidas before. I worked with Adidas for 4 years. I was part of the team that delivered into the Metaverse. So that sort of like was where a lot of my knowledge came from. After that, I worked with Prada, G-Star Raw, MasterCard, the Volkswagen Group. Was part of the Porsche drop as well. Think what you want about that. I was part of Salesforce, helping them launch the NFT cloud, and afterwards the 360, customer 360. That's kind of like the evolution of their product. Work with L'Oreal, working with Skoda right now, Cupra, and Shell, the energy company. So I've been around within that space. Most of this work is focused on advisory. Most of this work is focused on helping them understand and sort of like solidify their strategy within the space, right? So what is in for them? What is exciting about it? And a lot of that obviously has been changing. But the main thing is, and I'm a part-time DJ right now because obviously I'm quite busy with that side of my time and where I spend it. And a lot of time people from the space that are natively on Twitter or people that are building at the edge of technology of Web3 are asking me, why do you work with the man, right? Why do you work with the big brands where all what we are building here on blockchain and crypto obviously is much more focused on different things, right? Creating new systems, creating new financial systems, creating a new decentralized world. And I deeply believe that Web3 mainstream adoption is gonna come from those largest brands. I deeply believe that that's the way we're gonna go forward within that space. And the cool thing is that I'm not alone, right? If you look at the numbers, especially of, this is specifically graphic from an NFT tech, it shows that 526 brands and projects have happened within Web3, within the sort of like the last quarters. So, it's obviously a big number. There's obviously, as we know, a lot of failures because, yes, we are exploring a new technology, as we are sort of like developing a lot within, a new era of innovation. And 350 plus brands, and I'm talking major brands, I'm talking Fortune 500 level brands, have entered that space within the last 2 years. And among those 350 plus brands, we have the largest brands in the planet, right? We're talking about Amazon. We're all waiting to see what they're doing, but there are some hints out there. We've seen stuff from Coca-Cola, from Starbucks, obviously, from Nike, and many others, right? Disney, Adidas, obviously, the fashion groups coming out. So the question that I'm always trying to look at when people are asking me where this is headed is looking back to the past to where it started, right? And when you think about where it started, it always started back in December 21 when once, Adidas came out into the Metaverse, and then a couple weeks after Nike purchased or acquired Artifact. So a lot of that sort of like boom for brands in this space came out of, now brands have a slide to put on the wall and show to their board that, yes, there is something within the space that is worthwhile for them trying. So Adidas made 24 million in 24 hours, as we know, the number that was circulating everywhere, and created a very clear use case for brands, which is NFTs as an asset class. And the problem of that, or sort of like the main element of NFTs as an asset class is that, one, you depend on having that minting revenue to drive, obviously, revenue. You depend on royalties as a revenue stream as well. And you sort of like have to keep going around that system of either creating more ways of providing new means, or making the project exciting so people trade, so you take royalty from those trades and you can keep building the business, right? But for me, that's kind of like how this whole playbook, which I'm calling the V1 playbook of NFTs, or the V1 playbook of use case for brands, that's kind of like how that started. And if you remember those 350 plus brands we just covered, majority of them have taken pages of this playbook. Majority of them have iterated on it or changed a little bit, but its entirety has been pretty much the same around that use case of NFTs as an asset class. But the more time I spend with those brands and the more I work with them, the more I realize how difficult it is for them, right? Being on those rooms and being on those discussions and being on this sort of like strategic guidance just has shown me that it's extremely difficult for them to operate within that. And it's quite simple, if you want to like choose the top 3 problems out of probably 50, the biggest issues they are facing is, one, they have to obviously deal around all the treasury and finance elements. How do you justify to your finance team that you need to bring cryptocurrency into a public traded company, for example? How do you deal with volatile assets? We're seeing what's happening in the US right now with the regulations coming into place and securities and all that bullshit, if you want to call it, that's happening within there. So that makes it really hard for them to justify, right? Of course, there's on-ramp payments. Of course, there are companies that are spinning off a sort of like a second company or a shell company that they can do that with. Porsche has done that, Mercedes is doing it, other brands have done it, but still it's hard, right? The second thing is legal issues. We know that crypto and blockchain is still a lot of a wild west, especially when it comes to the finance elements of it, right? So there's a lot of legal elements that are being blockers for brands within that space. But one of the things that I try to be the loudest the most with those brands is that they all within that sort of like initial playbook, their main criteria was focusing on a very niche, small audience, which is the Web3 native, which is, probably a lot of people that are in this room right now, a lot of people that is in this conference right now. But despite the echo chamber and the sort of like the bubble that we live in, that we believe that everybody is in Web3, where it's not reality, I feel that we could literally fit everyone that's within that space in a building, right? That's how small that audience is today so far. And it's fine. We need to accept that because, we are at the edge of something new and we are developing and going towards something bigger. But that's not where we are at. So instead, why, those brands shouldn't be focusing on their Web2 audience already existing instead? So, the more I went through those thought process, the more I went to work with those brands within these last almost 2 years now, the more I start questioning myself, which is, what is the real problem that Web3 solves for brands, right? So how do we zoom out from that only use case that everybody got super tight with, that is NFTs as an asset class, and start looking to a wider opportunity, which is, what is the problem that Web3 solves for brands, right? And for me, most importantly, I know we talk a lot about the tech, we talk a lot about Web3, we talk a lot about NFTs and all of that, but I don't think that brands have a Web3 problem. I think that brands have engagement, loyalty and growth problem, because if you think about it, every single brand in the planet wants to have more engaged customers, wants to have more loyal customers, want to grow. So once you start looking from that perspective, I start coming up with sort of like this visual of, how does Web3 fit within that space, and what is the role of Web3 within that space if we identify and agree that those are the problems or those are the opportunities that those brands should be solving. And let's dive into each of them to sort of like start thinking about the possibilities and what is in or what is possible within that space. So if you look from, and again, I'm gonna go through this method of like just choosing 3, right? But it could be 50, it could be 100. There's a lot to explore here. I got 15 minutes only, so I'm gonna touch on 3 of them that I find quite exciting, quite interesting. I think that one of the things that this technology enables brands to do in a manner that wasn't possible before is that now you can measure engagement anywhere, right? You can literally issue proof of anything. For example, proof of attendance, proof of attention, proof of fandom, and things like that, which can now go beyond just the own channels that you have within your brand, but you can also, throw different events. You can be part of different events. You can be in digital and the physical world. So that starts being an interesting way on which now brands can measure that engagement in a manner that before, or with Web2 technology, could still be possible, but it's quite complex and not necessarily as straightforward as it can be with Web3. I think that brings us also to an element of omni-channel gamification. So you can start looking into different channels that are already existing within your brand, and you can gamify the engagement within those channels to generate new ways on which you can start connecting with your customers, right? I don't know how many of you know the brand I'm wearing this t-shirt from, 9DCC. If you don't, I recommend you having a look. G-Money has founded this company with a lot of that in mind, right? So how do we bring people together? How do we bring people closer? How do we make the customer become the user acquisition mechanics within that brand by giving people ownership over their own assets? And in this case, if you scan my phone, you can get a pop-up that you've met me, we can get in touch later, and I'm like going around and showing people it because it's quite interesting. I can build my own community on top of that, for example, right? So super interesting way in looking into the opportunities that can happen for brands. And one of the things that I'm really passionate about, because all those talks I'm doing with the brands, what I'm always trying to do is to balance, the maxi Diego that is looking into decentralization and pseudo-anonymous and all of that, with also, the Diego that spent since I was 16 years old with brands that are always looking to more data, so we can tailor better offerings, so we can offer better products, right? So what is in for brands that could be super exciting within that space? And I think that one really exciting point around engagement is looking into on-chain behavior data being much more interesting or much more important than personal information, right? So instead of me knowing your zip code, your name, your address, the country you live in, and all of that information, and trying to create almost like different silos, and then within those silos create look-alike audiences, why not start looking into people's actual behavior to then tailor an offering to them based on what they are doing, not who they are? Because the more the world evolves, the more we understand that the people that could fit within those buckets are not necessarily interested in the same things. Because a woman from Lisbon that is 35 years old might be very different than another woman from Lisbon that is 35 years old, right? And in marketing, we still have that idea that those look-alike audiences are the ones that are gonna like and do the same things. But once you start tapping in on on-chain behavior, for example, you know exactly what those people are doing regardless of who they are, regardless of any personal information. And I find that quite intriguing from a marketing perspective. And now that you start understanding and sort of like unboxing the possibilities within engagement, I think that now you can build another layer which is super interesting on top of it, which is loyalty, right? When you think about loyalty, there's this really interesting report from BCG that says, what are the biggest problems that every brand has when it comes to loyalty, and what is the opportunity that Web3 has to solve it, right? It's a huge report, super interesting, would highly recommend. It's basically Web3 opens new paths to customer loyalty. That's the title here in the bottom. And one slide that talks a lot about it is basically this four-stepper, right? So one huge problem is fragmented loyalty relationships. So there's a lot of, they say that at least the average American has between 10 to 12 loyalty programs within their phones or within their customer journey. And they don't necessarily engage really much with one, and very little with few within that, right? So it's pretty fragmented. There's a low activity from users within that, because the offerings are not necessarily compelling enough, because everything is living in silos. So if you engage with Adidas, most of the time you're gonna get just Adidas offerings. If you do that with Starbucks, it's similar, and so on, right? So it's pretty siloed. The third topic is about closed ecosystems, right? So we've seen that over and over. All those ecosystems are closed, and it's not necessarily exciting for you to engage with a certain loyalty program, because there's just one thing from one brand happening within it. And then the fourth and most important thing is the complexity of scaling partnerships, right? So how do you get more partners within that ecosystem when with Web2 you depend on data integration, you depend on GDPR, you don't want to send your entire customer base to another brand so they can activate that. You're not even legally allowed to do so, right? So that becomes a major blocker within that. So when you start thinking about those ideas, with all that engagement elements that we talked before, you can understand that you can start offering perks and rewards to the audience that's engaging with you. So let's say you can start looking through all those engagements that you have now mapped and tracked around different channels and different ecosystems, on channels and not necessarily on channels, digitally and physical channels. And depending on the behavior that you now are able to verify, you can start offering perks, you can start offering rewards, which then equals to more engagement, because more people get, more likely they will be to engage. Then when you start talking about the silos that we've seen on the BCG report and sort of like this, those closed gates, Web3 enables one thing that I'm really excited about, which is open loyalty, right? So I don't want to go too deep into it because obviously for the sake of time, but as we said before, if fostering partnerships is a hard thing to do because of data integration, what if you can do data integration through smart contracts, composability, you can put APIs behind it, and if this, then that, and you can basically get Starbucks and Adidas, for example, to do a very simple integration on the back of a smart contract on which nobody needs to exchange any data, everything's GDPR compliant, and the user can have a very seamless experience, right? So that's what starts becoming super exciting from an open loyalty perspective, because now you don't have just offerings from one brand, but you can expand on your already existing partnership or partners that you have, and you can start bringing them into that ecosystem to offer to your clients, right? Which is exciting because, for example, the work I'm doing with Shell has a ginormous amount of partners, right? Ferrari is one of them. So imagine if you could, for example, look into the customers from Shell that are consuming, let's say, the most premium products, and because Ferrari wants to target that specific customer but they don't have access to, now through these mechanics, Shell can allow them to give value to that customer that they want to bring closer to them without any problem of data integration, for example. So this becomes really exciting for us to start thinking about the possibilities and what can be built and what can be done. And the third thing is that, the more brands you can bring into play and the more offerings and more perks you can provide for an already existing audience within an already existing program, it's going to equal to growth. And not necessarily just financial growth, but you're going to have more people's attention from the outside because they're seeing that that membership program, loyalty program offers something that nobody else in the world does, so people want to come in. And the ones that are already part of it will start engaging more, and therefore you're going to start growing your engagement because now there's more stuff for them to do. So, if I engage more, do I get more? That's how it works. Cool, I will start engaging more. And you can start also bypassing the dead offers that we have within those membership programs, which is all about if you buy more, then you get more discount. If you buy this, then you get free shipping. If you show up here 3 times a week, then you get 10 cents off. It becomes very transactional, right? And within that sort of like expansion of offerings through partners, it can become money can buy experience, right? Imagine if you are one of the 5 in the planet that can attend a certain event, that can do certain thing, that can be put in front of a certain brand, that can get access to a certain product. It becomes super exciting for brands to play beyond the transaction and start building long-term relationships. And when you start looking into the sort of like the third element of growth, I touched a lot of it already, but you can have very clear KPIs which you can measure and track against. So you can look into how you are increasing engagement. You can look on how your audience is growing because now through those partnerships, for example, you're tapping into new audiences. You can also acquire new customers, as I said before, because people from the outside are going to be looking into something that it's very compelling and exciting and different. Therefore, people want to be part of that. So for me, talking about playbook, I think that first playbook of digital NFTs as an asset class, for major brands, it's pretty much dead. The more I talk to those brands, the more I see the difficulty they're having. The market has changed. Everybody has done it now. When Adidas did, it was super exciting because one of the first, right? But now we're seeing many other brands trying to replicate that still today, almost 2 years later, and we are seeing the reactions. It's tough to do it. It's extremely difficult. And even though if you could pull that off, the return you have is so small because the audience is still so small and liquidity in the market we are right now is extremely small, that is not even a case that you can push forward anymore with your board to get more funds to keep building on top of it, because the numbers just don't speak loud enough. For example, Adidas does 24 billion in revenue a year. That 24 million they've done is cool, but that's not the next 1 billion revenue generator that a brand can create that will make shareholders and everybody excited about. So for me, we need to start looking into a new playbook. We need to start together shaping a new idea of what's next, and how do we get brands excited? How do we build the right products as tech builders? How do we guide them through sort of like this new way and this new world where we are headed? Because from a market conditions, we all know where we are at, and we need to keep developing and delivering, because we know it's going to come back, and we know it's going to come down, and we know it's going to come up. But regardless of that, we need to build more sustainable business. So for me, I cannot write this playbook alone, and I won't, because I wouldn't entitle myself to do so. So for me, if you still remember WalkMe, we all gonna make it. I think we all need to come together to write that playbook. I think that the people in this room, the people that are in this space right now, are in the position of shaping the future of the internet. We are literally, and it's so funny because I was in Prague yesterday giving a talk, and they started asking me, what do you think about the current state of the Web3 market and the NFT market? And I was like, it's dead. Let's pack and go home, because AI has taken over, right? And it's so funny that we see so much of that on the internet right now, where Web3 is dead, Metaverse is dead, and so all of a sudden the Metaverse is alive again because Apple just announced something. And there's so much hype going around, and so much fear, and so much misinformation. And what people tend to forget is to zoom out, right? If you believe that Web3 is the next iteration of the internet, if you believe that Web3 is the next way on how we will evolve the way we connect with each other digitally, there is no fucking way that this thing is dead, because it barely started. I don't think we will stop using the internet tomorrow. I don't think we're gonna keep using the internet as we do now. It's gonna keep evolving. We're gonna have Web3, Web4, Web5, Web69, you name it, it's gonna happen. So we need to keep building towards that, but we need to make it more sustainable. We need to make it in a manner that is easier for those brands to understand. We need to stop talking about the very difficult, high-level, alien type of technology, because they don't get it. It's difficult for them to go through that process as well. So yeah, my call to action is let's fucking go. Let's build this together. If you want to connect, that's my LinkedIn. I create a lot of content in there because that's where the brands are. I'm really deep into Twitter too, but I think that my job is to translate the madness that we do here to the masses so they can understand what we want to achieve.